Okay, guys, so in this episode, I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about what's going on between the US and China. Did a little bit of research on what's going on with the race between the US and China for 5G, talk a little bit about IP theft and the trade war scenario. So if you want to hear my opinion, if you want to learn a little bit more, then please take a listen. All right, guys, let's talk about the situation between the US, China, and Huawei. I know I've been talking about this a lot, but that's because I think it's really important and it's a developing story. So, as we know, the US has enacted some sanctions, I guess, or a type of sanction against Huawei, which is one of China's biggest tech companies. They manufacture smartphones. In fact, they're the second largest smartphone manufacturer in the world. And they also are on the cutting edge of some of the 5G technology. So that's where I want to focus on is something that I keep hearing about is this battle between the US and China with 5G. I read headlines, but I never seem to get a lot of information about what exactly is all this hubbub about with the 5G stuff. So I did a little bit of digging, not too much here, but just a little bit, and it's some of it's pretty intuitive. So I just want to talk about some of that. Basically, there is speculation that right now, everyone's focused on just the trade war aspect of the U.S. and China, right? So we have enacted tariffs on some goods coming into the United States. They've enacted tariffs on goods going into China. So we've got this kind of tit-for-tat tariff deal that's been going on. Now, in addition to that, we took a super hard stance, and it was just a shot. It was like... It reminds me if you're in a boxing ring and some guys are feeling each other out, maybe exchanging a couple light blows, and then the one boxer just pops another one really hard, but it's not going to knock him down, it's not going to knock him out, but it's just saying like, hey, this is how hard we can hit you. I can hit you harder than this. So you need to be aware of the strength and the power that I've got. That is what this move reminded me of, because the United States basically could severely cripple Huawei, not just from the Android stuff, so we limited their access to Android, or at least temporarily. And that's only for new phones that are, I think, coming, it had to do with phones that are yet to be, sent out or whatever. But basically, the sanctions that we are putting on Huawei, it's not just U.S. stuff. So apparently there are carriers in other parts of the world, like Britain and maybe another country in Europe, where they're not going to be rolling out the newest Huawei phones. And beyond that, we have threatened their supply chain. So they may not be able to get new chips for their phones and other kinds of technology that require certain chips. And this is a big deal. This is ramping up this. Whatever is going on, it's ramping it up. And this is not just a trade war. This is like, I read a headline and I was thinking the exact same thing. Reminds me of like Cold War era stuff. It's like we're in a Cold War with China right now, and it's heating up, but in an interesting way. So what's the deal with 5G? So apparently what's going on is that Huawei is doing very well in the 5G space. So 5G is just the new set of, I'm going to really simplify it down here. I don't know that much about it, but I know little. Is that it's the new radio technology that's going to be used for phones. And it's going to be heavily geared towards data traffic and it's supposed to really improve bandwidth for the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is like, your refrigerator, washing machine, air conditioner, all the bullshit things that are going to be connected to the internet, beside just your phone. Now, in addition to that, I was reading that the 5G is also heavily focused on streaming because the level of streaming content has ballooned so much. Everybody is streaming. Everyone's uploading and downloading large amounts of streamed content. And apparently 5G technology is supposed to increase the bandwidth, the capability of streaming, uploading, downloading by a large amount. I read from a source, a guy named Adam Townsend on Twitter, very knowledgeable in this area, that it's supposed to increase the speed by like 100 times of what it is currently. And that, I mean, obviously that's a big deal. Now, what's going on with that and the U.S. is that we are, countries all over the world, especially in Europe, are rolling out 5G towers. Here's the situation. A lot of these towers are being supplied with parts from Huawei, the Chinese tech company. So the issue here is espionage. It's spying. It's all of that. So people are worried that China will be able to have easier access to critical parts of the critical information that's going to be passing through these 5G towers, because they're going to be supplying some of the hardware, and they'll be also having, they'll be supplying some hardware, but they'll also be using software to, I guess, regulate the hardware, and they'll have to have channels to update that. So you'll be having updates coming directly from Huawei, which is in China, which people are worried that they are connected with the Chinese government. Now, Huawei has rebutted this claim numerous times, saying they are a private company, they do not work with the government, but as we know, as we all speculate, I myself included, I think it's pretty obvious that if the Chinese Communist Party, the government says, hey, Huawei, we need you to do this, we need access, they're probably going to do it. I mean, the United States, we probably have some of the best I could be wrong here, but I feel like we have comparatively speaking to other parts of the world, we probably have a pretty good separation between privacy, private companies and what the government can and can't do to them and with them. And we have huge problems. I mean, the government is probably in the back door of many tech companies in the U.S. And it's, and that's something that we frown upon here. And I don't think it's frowned upon over there in China nearly as much. So this is the potential threat. Now, in Europe, they're already rolling out 5G towers with Huawei technology. And I guess the race is to make sure, the race between the U.S. and China is to not allow China to get the upper hand in the deployment of 5G technology, so that way they don't have the upper hand in terms of information technology and having controlling the flow of data. I mean, this is critical information infrastructure, right? I mean, we're talking about, I don't even know what terminology to use. Terabytes, maybe thousands, millions, I don't know, of terabytes of data running through potentially compromised networks. And key here is potentially. We don't know what would happen here, but this is the concern. Okay, I'm gonna pause here. Got some ads to run, and we'll be right back. So if you want to skip ahead, go ahead, and we'll be right back. Hey everybody, do you want to record your own podcast like me? Well, Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. That's right, mofos. It's easy. Check it out. Okay, and we're back. So, I was just talking about the potential hazard. Now, basically what we're doing and I've read several articles on this now in more detail about the potential threat. So, some people are trying to take Huawei at their word. And they're saying, look, Huawei says that they aren't going to do anything, that they're not connected to the government. I think we can all pretty much dismiss that. The issue is not whether or not they intend to do it now or later. It's really about the payoff. It's not about what's the probability of this happening. It's really like, if they do decide to do this, how bad can it be? And from what I've read, it seems like really the smart decision is to block Huawei from using their technology in the U.S. critical infrastructure. So the U.S. the U.S. government has already blocked certain government agencies and government workers from using Huawei technology or certain Chinese products for communications. Probably a good move. And it's arguable that all of this stuff that's going on right now is potentially, the fact that we are potentially blocking Huawei from their supply chain, the fact that we are blocking them potentially from Android. All of this is also tied up not only in the trade scenario, but also in the 5G race as well. And that this could potentially cripple their ability to, I don't know this for sure, but it seems like this might cripple their ability to roll out certain 5G technology. I'm not sure. I don't know that for a fact, but I've read some speculation that the 5G race between the US and China could play a role in what's going on right now. So obviously there is a risk, and I would say it is smart. I do agree with the United States decision that we should not be using Huawei technology for our critical 5G infrastructure. Now, does that mean we can't use Huawei phones? No, I think I don't think there's a ban on Huawei phones. For some reason, I need to probably look into that, but for some reason we don't have any here in the US, but all over the world people are using Huawei products. But I do agree with the stance that we should probably not allow them to be providers of that critical information infrastructure. From what I've read, yes, from what I've read, there's no guarantee. There's no way to block. There's no way to block bad actors completely from the system, but there's no reason to give them easier access. Basically, is the case here, and by allowing them to supply the United States and some of our allies with these critical components, it's just basically making it easier to set up if they do decide they want to launch some kind of spying operation, or if they want to manipulate flows of internet traffic or data traffic, or who knows what they can do with it. I don't know. So the Cold War that we are now seemingly engaged in with China is getting really interesting. So this is not just about trade. This is not just about tariffs. This is about a 5G competition between the United States and China to see who's going to be the dominant player, which companies are going to be the dominant players internationally in the 5G space. So it begs the question, well, I don't even know if that's used properly, but it is makes me wonder, is it possible that we are punching Huawei to slow them down in their deployment of 5G technology in other parts of the world, right? Is that what's going on? Or is this legitimately hitting them for potential IP theft? So that's another thing, is that Huawei has been accused of a lot of IP theft from, I believe I read something, it was Microsoft and Dell have a joint venture that they accused Huawei of trying to steal some of their data storage secrets, and apparently they've also been accused of stealing information from T-Mobile, and there's some things going through the courts right now with Huawei. So there's layers to this whole thing with China. We're dealing with them on the trade front. We're dealing with them on a 5G international arms race of 5G. We're also dealing with the IP theft aspect, which is that apparently they've been taking IP from our companies, which we've all heard about for a long time. So what the president is doing, what do we think about it? I love the Chinese people. I love Chinese culture. I am learning Mandarin. I love it. I enjoy it. But I do have to say that I don't like a lot of the things the Chinese government does, and I don't like a lot of the things they stand for. And I do believe that IP theft has been occurring. And so I would say that the president I agree with what he's doing. In the end, I hope this works out for everybody. I really do. I don't want this thing to get escalated. I don't think anybody wants this thing to be escalated. That being said, I do agree with his decision to do this, and I'm proud that he's doing it. And I'll also say that I don't think the next president will be able to carry this on. And I do believe that the Chinese are going to attempt to wait this out. I think that they will grant some minor concessions in order to kind of keep their supply chain open. Because here's my thought. Take it for what it's worth. Is if we do end up shutting down major parts of their supply chain, they don't get access to critical chips they need to build their products. That is going to ramp up our tension with China dramatically. So at that point, I don't know what's on the table. I have read some interesting perspectives that China is not going to back down because they've already gone through a century of humiliation. That's what they call after the Opium Wars with China in the 1840s with the British. And before that, the British and other international powers were dividing up China for a while throughout the 1800s. And China was very weak at that time because when the British came to China, the Chinese refused to adopt the Western technology. They didn't see a reason to. And so whenever the Western powers came in and basically started forcefully taking over ports in China and forcefully taking over areas of China, the Chinese weren't able to deal with it because they didn't have the same military technology. So they were what they call as the century of humiliation, which lasted until about 1949 when Mao Zedong, the communist leader, took over. And so it seems, and part of this is from what I've been reading. Part of this perspective is also from reading Adam Townsend. Brilliant dude on Twitter. Check him out. And part of it could be that if they decide not to back down from this fight, we could see major escalation. We could see critical U.S. infrastructure being hacked more severely than we've ever seen it hacked before. We could see us doing the same thing to China. This could get very interesting. I'm not saying it will, but it could. So, interesting situation we're in. This is far more interesting than the Russia collusion bullshit that we've been hearing for the last couple of years. So, pay attention, guys. Watch out. That's it.